company, like Trevor said, is Irish owned, Irish founded, and kind of within the space of, I'd say 10 years, went from just Irish business to having more than 10 locations. So it went from just an Irish company to a global company pretty quick. So I was then hired in November 2021. It was a new role, and the info I was given was that we became global. We had to make a decision on which way we went. We went with the global provider solution, where, again, I imagine that comes from the sales process where you kind of get sold that line of, well, look, you don't worry about it, we'll do everything, you have everything in one place and it's all great, and that's the line they went. When I got brought in, it was kind of, look, we made that decision, but we're not really sure if it was the right choice. So we want to have a proper payroll strategy, which I think we're seeing in a lot of businesses now. Kind of payroll's kind of finally getting that place at the table where strategy is no longer just left with a financial controller or a CFO. So it was my job to kind of go in, assess the situation, and like I said, they were saying we're not sure if it was the right decision. And then obviously when I speak to my team within Mercury, it was kind of something that you kind of maybe see with numerous global providers. And kind of the situation we were in was that we had no direct contact with our payroll admins in country. So that was kind of issue number one, was that if we had a question about our payroll in Denmark or in Spain, we couldn't just reach out to the person actually doing our payroll and ask them a question. We had to go through our provider, we then go to who are ultimately outsourcing the outsource, is what I would call it, in terms of they're using another, they're not calculating the payroll for us, another company's then. So it very much created that middleman where we weren't able to go direct. We need to speak to the provider themselves. They finally kind of allowed us to be on a call with the direct provider, with them on it as well, and within 5 minutes the whole thing was, once we got to speak directly with that provider, everything got sorted out in 5 minutes. Anything that was getting lost in translation was no longer getting lost in translation. And whilst that was great, it was kind of like, why did it take us 3 months to get to that point? Why couldn't we pick the phone up 3 months ago? And we would have had one less to spend with the employee, we would have had a lot less stress, a lot less time. So that's kind of the feedback that was coming from the team. So slow response time to queries, lack of local knowledge. So again, we were being outsourced by the outsourcer, so we weren't always sure where that was going. There was kind of, I don't think that was always going locally. So sometimes you kind of get computer says no kind of answers in terms of very kind of scripted answers, where it's like, it doesn't really answer the question we asked. Language barrier, so I mean, we were running all 14 payrolls from within Dublin, and within the team we did have we had different languages in the team, but you're never going to have 14 languages, you never have every language covered. So for us, it was very much, we wanted English-speaking kind of providers that locally, but that could speak English and communicate with us in English to, again, improve that communication line. When I joined, so kind of, we had a weekly and a monthly payroll at Mercury. So we had a weekly payroll that had over 1,000 people on it. So you could imagine the constant churn of that payroll. You can imagine it was never ending. And one big issue we had on the weekly payroll when we went in was that these guys don't have a company laptop. All they have is their own personal phone. And at sales stage with our provider, we were told that Payslips can be accessed off any device, no problem, you're all good, great, that's ticked off. In reality, I went down to the site one day, kind of the first time I was meeting people, and straight away it was, we can't even look at our payslips. And they would show me, they'd log in, everything was fine, but when they click on the payslip, it just was not working. So again, that's 1,200 people that's impacted, so that's huge. So that was another big issue, and again, we just could not get to the bottom with the provider. So long process schedules was something else, and again, because we had that kind of middleman kind of approach, it just meant that our process schedules, so we were paying on the 25th of the month, we'd often need to submit our instructions on the 5th. So again, there's just not really much downtime kind of between the end of one, like you do your payroll, you do your journal, your month end, and then you're probably around, maybe the 2nd or the 3rd of the month in some cases, and then your payroll is due on the 6th or the 5th or the 6th. And we just didn't have that downtime. So what we wanted to find was kind of and again, we spoke to them about it, it wasn't like, okay, they can't do it, can we get these a bit shorter? And it just wasn't the case. So that's kind of another sign that kind of pointed that maybe we're not going to get to where we get. And then at the bottom I put expensive, and I put that at the bottom for a reason, because I think if these ones didn't exist at the top there, if those weren't there and we were having a great service, then I'd be able to go to our CFO or our controller and say, look, it is expensive, but it's worth it. You know, we're getting what we need out of it. We're happy with that. Where we were really was Obviously, everyone was getting paid on time because that's non-negotiable. But the issue we had was how we were getting there, and it was just a very stressful kind of how we were getting to that point of making everyone happy, and kind of the payroll team ourselves, kind of not being under that constant stress. So what we were looking for was basically the opposite of what we had. We wanted direct contact with English-speaking admins. We wanted set SLAs where we'd know that we'd get responses quickly, shorter process schedules, which I touched on, technology integrations. So that sounds quite vague, but and that will kind of come a bit clearer as we go on. User-friendly system or portal. Now, that's not to say that what we didn't have wasn't already user-friendly, but we didn't want to lose that either. And easy access to payslips for all employees, so weekly and monthly. And then again, cost at the bottom, but again, I don't want to put too much emphasis on cost, because if you get what you want out of it, it's worth the cost. So how do we get there? So the big danger that I wanted to avoid was kind of moving from one global provider to another, because chances are you're going to find yourself in exactly the same position just after you've had a big, massive implementation, and we've actually not gone anywhere, we're seeing the same issues here as we were there. So that was one to avoid. So what we did want to find was a solution that allows us flexibility with providers, but kind of also covers that compliance and technology need. So that basically resulted in local providers that we can trust. And then obviously we also had to satisfy internally the teams that we work with requirements. So whilst we're at payroll, obviously it touches every team. It touches HR, legal, IT, internal security. So when I say internal security, I say, what I mean by that is we choose a vendor. Obviously, then legal needs to look at the contract, make sure everything's fine on that point. Internal security, you're going to want to know, well, where's your service held? How's that all work? So these things all had to be considered, but kind of before we just went, right, this is what we're going to do, and there we go. And then, like I just kind of really touched on there, it needs to kind of fit in with the wider strategy and goals of the whole business. So where's the business going to go from here? So we've already grown to this. Where's that next stage of growth, and can any solution that we choose accommodate that growth? Whether that be countries that we may not have dealt with before, or just pure size. So the solution for us, we found, was Payzaar. And I think someone mentioned, I think in Celine, she mentioned kind of they had they were able to move at their own pace. Now for us, I think it's worth mentioning here that we had to give 6 months notice to our current provider that we were leaving. And 6 months is just not going to be enough time to move all 14 countries. So really, I was kind of preparing kind of 12 months on, thinking, right, how do we do this? What's the best way of doing it? And kind of going from that way, and kind of speaking to Trevor probably when we were still in contract, and still kind of had at least a year left on our contract to make sure that we'd have enough time to implement this. Because we went from, obviously once we handed our notice to our current provider, it was everything finishes 31st of the 12th, and then you're all 14 countries, and then with their new providers from the 1st of January. So very daunting when you think about it in terms of this is kind of, we can't get this wrong. You know, it's kind of very much this is going to happen on this day. We need to make sure that we're doing things properly. So working alongside Payzaar, they kind of ticked all those boxes really for us. And you can see here, and again, it's been touched on a few times here, on the HR side, we have HR Connect, where things get a little bit simpler on the input side, where if we're getting numerous different data sources for our inputs that aren't particularly advanced, we can just still put, as long as we're doing the background work, we can put those into Payzaar and off they go. We have a lot more control over what's happening in the middle. Our providers, we now have that direct contact, and then we even have the direct contact with the providers within Payzaar. So we can now ask a question within Payzaar, so you check a payslip or you see something you don't like, you can literally send a message without rejecting or approving, just saying, are you sure this is right? Or you can reject it and say, not sure about X, Y, Z, and then that audit trail is then there. So then if you ever have someone that goes off sick or something like that, you'll literally go, well, where are we on the payroll? I can log in, I can literally see yesterday they asked a question on this, or we got the reports yesterday, we were just waiting on that, and the traffic light system was mentioned as well. So all these things kind of just added up for us in terms of where we wanted to go, and kind of met all those needs that I mentioned on the previous slide. Accounting Connect is another one for us where we didn't really have any control, not control over our journals, but it was, we were getting our journals from our global provider, and every month we were kind of going back and forth. We found that new pay elements weren't being entered, or they were being entered incorrectly, or just kind of, it was never and they always seem to come in different formats. And again, even though that was one local provider, we were clearly getting that information from the outsource of the outsource. So that was something we wanted to standardise, was our GL process, to make things a little bit easier on that side. And what Accounting Connected for us really was kind of give us that control in terms of, we do the mapping on the back end, but then once we have our approved gross and net, we know that as soon as we run our GL file, it's going to spit out exactly what we've approved in the gross and net. Nothing's going to get missed off, everything's going to be where we want it to be. So that was kind of the thought process behind why we chose Payzaar, and then on top of that, obviously, it meant that we can then go out and find the providers that we want. So we're no longer kind of stuck with our global providers. We can now go to Spain and say, speak to 3 different providers, pick the best one. We did the same with UK and ended up picking Paycheck. And if you do have locations where this is brand new, I don't have any connections in that country, I would reach out to Trevor or to Max or Mark, and they'd say to me, well, look, we know of these guys. Now, they'd never be biased. They would just be saying, we know that these guys are out there. Go and speak to them yourself and decide which one you think is best. We're not going to push you where to go, but here's a list of people that we deal with that we've never had any issues with. So if you are ever in that position where you're thinking, well, I don't know who do we choose and where, that support is there as well. So it's kind of just kind of ticked every box. So then we get to, once we've chosen the solution, it's kind of, again, it gets that daunting. I call it keeping the lights on, but how do we make sure that we continue to pay everyone on time whilst also implementing this big, massive project that has to go live on January the 1st that we know we've got X amount of time to do. So it was very much a case for us of working closely with Payzaar, planning and project management. So again, we didn't kind of get to that point of hand our notice in with the provider of 6 months and then say, all right, now what do we do? It was kind of, we had that lined up. We knew 12 months ago that we were potentially looking into this. We knew that's the direction we were going to go. Contracts were signed with Payzaar before we handed in our note, before that 6 month period. And just basically gave ourselves the best chance and the most amount of time to kind of make sure that we could get everything in line and in a row. And again, because we had to obviously keep the lights on, keep everything going as is, when we didn't rely on that support, we could get consultancy support from Payzaar and kind of say that we're a bit light on transfer of data, we're a bit light in this area, and then again we could get that as part of the service and implementation. Basically, Payzaar said to us, you can rely on us as much or as little as you want to suit your needs, right? And also you've got to work closely with your new providers to ensure a smooth transition. So again, parallel runs, obviously transfer of data, things like that. One thing probably to note would be that obviously once you hand in, I keep saying hand, once you tell your current provider you won't be going with them anymore, when you're already at a poor customer service level, you can imagine that after the next 6 months, it certainly didn't get any better than that. So you're going to have to bear that in mind as well, that you are going to be fighting that battle. And again, I put there at the bottom, kind of lots of hard work, is that it is, it's hard, it's daunting, but kind of what I was saying to my team was that it's short-term pain for long-term gain, because we're going through pain every month anyway, right? The payroll process at the minute is painful. So there's going to be a little bit more pain for a little bit more time, but then we should start to see the gain from it once we've made that change. And the result of that was kind of standardization of processes, approvals, and reporting through the Payzaar portal. So again, everything goes, even though now we're using numerous providers rather than one, everything still goes through that one place. So we're not kind of scrambling and, we got our Spanish payroll here, we got the Dutch one here. It's still in that one place, that centralized place. We now have local providers in all locations with strong knowledge and English speaking. So again, we've ticked that box of customer service. We're now a lot happier. We know that if we send a query, it's being seen by the right person and we're getting a response within, I think, 24 hours is kind of the SLA that we have with all of our providers, but the response times are normally way quicker than that. And we know that we're getting it from someone that knows exactly what they're talking about. And then peace of mind around audit and compliance. So again, ISO, we're using an ISO certified platform, so we can be confident in the knowledge of audit, compliance, again, ticking those boxes with not only your own team, but kind of other teams like IT, for example. Our process and schedule, I mentioned that earlier, that we just had such a long schedule. So under the new providers, our processing times were kind of, they went from being between the 5th and the 7th of the month to kind of the 12th to I think the 17th of the month in some locations. So that's basically getting your employees' time back, right? That's giving everyone that time to focus on those projects that maybe they couldn't focus on because they feel they're constantly in that kind of payroll cycle. So that was massive for us, was just kind of, we got time back basically to focus on the things that we weren't necessarily the day-to-day. Better technology with more control. I touched on it with the GL process, but another thing that we had with our global provider was that they would issue the payslips for us on our behalf, and often that SLA wasn't being stuck to in terms of what time that was uploaded, and we'd often have payslips being uploaded late, which was kind of a real frustration for us because we were reaching out to them saying, why haven't you done it? Here in silence, it's out of our control, we can't physically do it, we're completely reliant on that provider to do that. And what we have with Payzaar now is that we're actually in control of when we post those payslips to employees. So we go in, we upload them, and we then, it doesn't have to be on the spot, you can set a time, you can say, I want these to go at midnight, I want to go at 9 AM tomorrow, I want to go, so you know when they're going to get their payslips, as opposed to that horrible, we've missed the deadline from the provider, they're not getting back to me, what am I going to tell everyone tomorrow when there's no one's payslips around? So it's just, again, removing that, and it sounds like, well, you're giving yourself more work, but because you're the one doing it, but it's not. It's giving yourself more control and making sure that a very simple task is now in your hands, and it's, you know, you're going to make those deadlines. All employees able to access payslips from any device. So that was kind of job. So we were actually able to implement that before we went live with Payzaar. We kind of said, look, we have to fix this for our weekly guys. They can't spend another 6 months not being able to view their payslips. So that was something we managed to turn around, I think, in 8 to 12 weeks. I think we managed to move everyone from the global provider's payslip portal to our one, just for those weekly guys. Everyone else came along on January the 1st, but that was huge. So, and again, I talk about kind of getting time back. We're no longer getting an email, or we're no longer getting 25 emails every Thursday saying I can't access my payslip. We're no longer going in, downloading it, password protecting it, sending it by email because we have no other way of getting it to them. So, just kind of little things like that, the kind of the small wins that start adding up on a weekly basis in that instance, but also on a monthly basis. And then the bottom there, considerable cost savings. So again, if you want to please senior management, financial controller, things like that, it just, now, again, that wasn't the motivation behind the move, but it was a side product of that. If I think of our payslip cost, I think we went from €1 per payslip with the global provider to 25 or 30 cents per payslip with the new setup. So again, that alone, I think our monthly cost on payslips became our quarterly cost on payslips. So it's just a huge saving, and people can actually see it, which is kind of the main thing, right? Again, like we would have paid the exact same price for that. It wasn't a case of let's do these things to save money. And that's it. Any questions?